I am Sarah. I'm 42 years old, and I have 3 children. My husband, James, is 46. We have been married for 20 years. When we first met, James was full of life. He laughed at everything, and he could turn even the darkest days into something bright. I thought I had found the one who would love me forever. When we got married, we promised each other a life of happiness. And for a time, it felt like we were living that promise. Our first child, Emma, came 3 years into our marriage. She was our light. 2 years later, we had Jacob, and he was our little explorer, always curious about the world. 5 years after Jacob, we had our youngest, Mia, a sweet and thoughtful soul who loved everyone deeply. At first, James was everything I hoped for in a partner. He worked hard at his job, but he always made time for us. We went on picnics, celebrated every small victory, and laughed together. He used to bring me flowers just because. And every night he'd say, "Good night, my love." I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. But life has a way of changing things. About 8 years ago, James started to drift away. He worked late hours and spent weekends on work trips. At first, I believed him. But then he stopped talking to me. He stopped looking at me the way he used to. The flowers stopped coming, and the words "I love you" disappeared. When I asked him why, he'd brush it off and say, "I'm doing this for our family. Why can't you understand that?" I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think he was still the man I married. But my heart told me something else. One evening, while cleaning our bedroom, I found a receipt for a dinner for 2 at a restaurant we'd never been to. My stomach sank. I confronted him that night. He looked at me, emotionless, and said, "It's nothing. Don't make it a big deal." But it was a big deal. My heart knew it. The distance between us grew. He was there physically, but his mind, his heart was somewhere else. For years, I tried to hold on. I told myself that if I worked harder, if I loved him more, maybe he'd come back to me. But nothing changed. I was raising our children, managing the house, and carrying the weight of a love that felt one-sided. 2 years ago, I met someone I hadn't seen since college. His name was Ethan. He was visiting our town for a business conference. We ran into each other at a coffee shop. He looked the same but older, wiser. We talked for hours. He asked me how I was, and for the first time in years, someone truly listened. Ethan reminded me of a version of myself I had forgotten. We didn't plan to meet again, but we did. For months, we exchanged messages, met for coffee, and shared our lives. He told me about his struggles, his dreams, and he reminded me that I was still Sarah, not just a wife or a mother, but a person with hopes, desires, and value. Then James found out. He wasn't angry at first. He was hurt. He said, "How could you? After everything I've done for this family?" And I told him, "Because I've been lonely for years. Because you stopped seeing me." For the first time in a long time we talked. Really talked. James admitted he had been seeing someone else. Her name was Claire. He said it was nothing serious, that it was a mistake. But my heart shattered. All the years I spent trying to hold on, all the nights I cried alone, it all came flooding back. We decided to go to therapy, not for the sake of saving our marriage, but to figure out if it was worth saving. Therapy was hard. We had to confront years of pain, neglect, and mistakes. I told James about Ethan, about how he made me feel alive again. James told me he felt trapped, like he was failing as a husband and a father. We were 2 broken people trying to make sense of our lives. One night, after a particularly emotional session, James sat with me on the couch. He said, "I want to try. Not because it's easy, but because you matter to me." For the first time in years, I believed him. I said, "I'll try too, but it has to be real. No more lies. We started to rebuild, piece by piece. James ended things with Claire, and I stopped talking to Ethan. It wasn't easy. There were days I wanted to walk away, days I wondered if we were making a mistake. But then there were moments, small, fleeting moments, where I saw the man I fell in love with. He'd hold my hand during a walk, or laugh at something silly the kids did. And in those moments, I felt hope. My children, especially Emma, noticed the changes. One day, Emma said, "Mom, you're smiling more. It's nice to see." Her words stayed with me. I realized that even if James and I didn't have a perfect marriage, we could still build a happy home for our children. Now, 2 years later, James and I are still working on us. We've learned to communicate better. We've learned to forgive. But most importantly, I've learned to value myself. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. I take time for myself, whether it's a walk in the park or a coffee date with a friend. Life isn't perfect, and it never will be. There are still days when doubt creeps in, when the past feels too heavy to carry. But I've learned that love isn't just about the good times. It's about the effort, the willingness to fight for something you believe in. And for now, I believe in us.